Every morning, Arnold Harrison waits at the edge of his ranch with a coffee in one hand and a plastic tub of raw meat in the other. That's where the wild bobcat always appears, walking straight to his spot. The old man simply puts out food, and in return, the bobcat offers his quiet, consistent presence. But on this morning, the bobcat doesn't just wait for food. For the first time in their uneasy friendship, the predator steps forward. And he has brought a gift. He walks right up to the old man and drops an object at his feet, something lost for years. As Arnold bends down, his hands trembling, he brushes away the dirt to reveal an old, dirty hair bow. And when he recognizes it, he completely breaks down in tears. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning sun spilled golden light across the Harrison property in northern Montana, illuminating the frost-kissed grass that stretched toward the pine forest beyond. Arnold Harrison, 72 years old with weathered hands that spoke of decades working as a farmer, stood at his kitchen window nursing his first cup of coffee. The steam rose in lazy spirals, catching the light as he watched the familiar tree line where the domesticated world ended and the wild began. His wife Amelia hummed softly as she prepared breakfast, the smell of bacon and fresh biscuits filling their modest ranch house. They had built this life together over 48 years of marriage, choosing this remote corner of Montana specifically for its proximity to untamed wilderness. Arnold had spent his career studying mountain ecosystems, while Amelia had taught environmental science at the local high school until retirement claimed them both 5 years ago. Remember when Joy used to insist on eating breakfast outside, even in winter? Amelia asked, sliding a plate in front of her husband. Said she needed to watch for her animals. Arnold smiled at the memory. Their daughter Joy had been their miracle child, arriving after 7 years of trying and 2 miscarriages that had nearly broken their hearts. From the moment she could walk, Joy had displayed an almost supernatural connection to animals. While other children collected dolls or trading cards, Joy collected feathers, bones, and shed antlers, creating elaborate displays in her bedroom that she called her Museum of the Forest. Joy's childhood had been filled with rescued creatures, injured birds nursed back to health in shoeboxes, orphaned rabbits raised with eyedroppers, and once, memorably, a lame raccoon she'd named Captain who lived in their garage for 6 months. But nothing compared to her relationship with the bobcat. It had started when Joy was 8 years old. She'd been playing near the woodpile on a bright September afternoon when she'd spotted what she thought was a stray kitten. Arnold still remembered her breathless excitement as she'd burst through the door. "Daddy, there's a kitty outside. Can we keep it, please?" Arnold had followed his daughter outside, expecting to find a neighbor's escaped tabby. Instead, he'd frozen at the sight of a young bobcat kitten, perhaps 4 months old, sitting beside the woodpile with its distinctive tufted ears twitching in the afternoon breeze. Its spotted coat gleamed in the sunlight, and its eyes, those wild amber eyes, watched them with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Joy, honey, that's not a house cat," Arnold had said gently, pulling his daughter back. "That's a bobcat kitten." But Joy hadn't shown fear. Instead, her eyes had widened with wonder. "Even better," she'd whispered. Over the following weeks, despite Arnold's initial protests, Joy had begun leaving small offerings of food at the edge of their property. She'd sit on the porch for hours, perfectly still, watching as the young bobcat gradually grew bolder. Arnold had monitored the situation carefully, his professional knowledge warring with his paternal protectiveness. But he couldn't deny the extraordinary bond developing between his daughter and the wild creature. bobcat's mother had eventually appeared, a magnificent female with battle scars across her muzzle, watching from the shadows as her kitten interacted with the human child. Arnold had held his breath during those encounters, but the mother bobcat had seemed to recognize something in Joy, perhaps the same gentleness that drew all animals to her, and had allowed the strange friendship to continue. Joy had named the young bobcat Blinky for the slow, deliberate way he would blink at her, a sign of trust in feline language that Joy had learned from library books she'd devoured on wild cats. As Blinky grew from kitten to adolescent to adult, he'd maintained his connection to the Harrison property. He never became tame. Joy wouldn't have wanted that. But he became a regular presence, appearing at dawn and dusk to accept the food Joy offered, and sometimes simply to sit in companionable silence with the girl who had first shown him kindness. The gifts had started when Blinky was about 2 years old. Joy would find small treasures left where she usually placed his food: a blue jay feather, a peculiarly shaped pine cone, once the skull of a field mouse bleached white by the sun. Joy had treasured each offering, understanding them as Blinky's way of reciprocating, of maintaining the balance of their unusual friendship. Arnold's reverie was broken by the sound of tires on gravel. He looked up to see the mail truck pulling away, and his heart clenched as it always did these days. 3 months had passed since Joy had deployed with her unit to Afghanistan. His brave, nature-loving daughter had surprised everyone by enlisting in the Army at 22, right after completing her degree in veterinary science. "I want to help working dogs in combat zones," she'd explained, her jaw set with the same determination she'd shown as a child, refusing to give up on wounded animals. "Those dogs save lives, Dad. They deserve the best care we can give them." Arnold retrieved the mail, his hands trembling slightly as he sorted through bills and advertisements, looking for the distinctive handwriting of his daughter's letters. Nothing today. The last letter had arrived 2 weeks ago, cheerful and full of stories about the military dogs she worked with. But Arnold couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his chest since she'd left. After Joy's deployment, something remarkable had happened. Blinky had continued to appear at the property, but now he would pace along the tree line, clearly searching for something, or someone. The bobcat would sit at the exact spot where Joy used to stand with his morning meal, his amber eyes scanning the house, waiting for a familiar figure who never emerged. Watching the animal's obvious distress had moved Arnold in a way he hadn't expected. One morning, unable to bear Blinky's vigil any longer, he'd taken the container of raw chicken and venison scraps Amelia had prepared and walked slowly toward Joy's usual feeding spot. Blinky had tensed, ready to flee. Arnold had moved with deliberate calm, channeling everything Joy had taught him about approaching wild animals. He'd set the food down and retreated to the porch, sitting in Joy's old wooden chair. "She'll come back," he'd said softly to the bobcat. "I promise you, she'll come back." It had taken 3 weeks of patient, consistent effort before Blinky had accepted Arnold as Joy's substitute. The bobcat would never show Arnold the same easy familiarity he'd shared with Joy. But gradually, a trust had developed. Arnold found unexpected comfort in maintaining this routine, feeling connected to his daughter through the ritual she'd established. The seasons shifted from autumn to winter, the Montana landscape transforming under blankets of snow. Arnold bundled up each morning, trudging through drifts to leave Blinky's food. The bobcat's tracks in the snow told Arnold he was surviving well, his territory overlapping with the Harrison property in a way that suggested he considered it part of his home range. Amelia worried about Arnold's dedication to feeding the bobcat, especially on mornings when the temperature dropped to 20 below and the wind cut through even the heaviest coats. But she understood what the ritual meant to her husband. It was a promise kept, a connection maintained, a daily act of faith that their daughter would return to continue what she'd started. One February morning, the phone rang at 4 a.m. Arnold jolted awake, his heart hammering as he reached for the receiver. These calls were what every military parent dreaded. "Mr. Harrison?" The voice was official, controlled. "This is Captain Jennifer Martinez from Dover Air Force Base. I'm calling about your daughter, Specialist Joy Harrison." The room seemed to tilt. Amelia's hand found his in the darkness, squeezing tight. "There's been an incident. Specialist Harrison's unit encountered an IED during a routine patrol. She's alive, but she's been injured. She's being evacuated to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany for treatment." The next hours passed in a blur of phone calls, desperate attempts to get more information, and the horrible limbo of not knowing the extent of Joy's injuries. Arnold went through the motions of his day, but his mind was thousands of miles away with his daughter. Despite everything, he still went out to feed Blinky that morning. The Bobcat appeared almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting. But something was different. Blinky paced back and forth, vocalizing with soft chirps and growls Arnold had never heard from him before. The animal's agitation was palpable. "She's hurt," Arnold found himself saying, his voice cracking. "Our girl is hurt, and I can't do anything to help her." Blinky stopped pacing and stared at Arnold with those penetrating amber eyes. For a moment, Arnold could have sworn the Bobcat understood. The next 3 days were agony. Joy had undergone surgery for shrapnel wounds to her left leg and shoulder. The doctors were optimistic, but complications were always possible. Arnold and Amelia barely slept, taking turns sitting by the phone waiting for updates. On the 4th morning, Arnold dragged himself outside for Blinky's feeding. His eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep and worry, and he moved like a man 20 years older. The sunrise was spectacular. Bands of pink and gold across a crystal-clear sky. But Arnold couldn't appreciate its beauty. Blinky was already waiting, but he wasn't alone. The Bobcat sat perfectly still about 10 feet from the feeding spot, and at his feet lay something Arnold couldn't quite make out. As Arnold approached, Blinky did something unprecedented. He picked up the object gently in his mouth and padded forward, closer to Arnold than he'd ever come before. With deliberate care, Blinky placed the object at Arnold's feet, then stepped back, maintaining eye contact. Arnold's hands shook as he bent to retrieve what the Bobcat had brought. It was covered in dirt and forest debris, but as he brushed it clean, his breath caught in his throat. It was a hair bow, faded pink satin with tiny embroidered roses, the edges frayed but still recognizable. Arnold's legs nearly gave out as memories crashed over him. This was the hair bow he'd bought Joy for her 10th birthday. The one she'd worn constantly until she'd lost it during a hike when she was 12. She'd been inconsolable, searching for hours, returning to the trail day after day hoping to find it. "It was my lucky bow," she'd sobbed. "The one you gave me. Now it's gone forever." But it wasn't gone. Somehow, impossibly, Blinky had found it. The Bobcat must have discovered it somewhere in his territory, perhaps unearthed by snowmelt or wind, and had carried it here. Arnold's vision blurred as tears streamed down his weathered face. He clutched the small bow to his chest, feeling like he'd been given a sign, a message of hope when he needed it most. "Thank you," he whispered to Blinky, who still sat watching him. "Thank you." That afternoon, the phone rang again. This time, it was Joy herself, her voice weak but wonderfully, beautifully alive. "Dad? I'm okay. I'm gonna be okay." Arnold sobbed with relief. Amelia pressed against him as they shared the phone, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. Joy explained that the shrapnel had been successfully removed, and while she'd need months of physical therapy, she was expected to make a full recovery. She was being medically discharged and would be home within 2 weeks. "Dad," Joy said softly, "have you been taking care of Blinky?" "Every day, sweetheart, every single day. And Joy, he brought me something. You're not going to believe this." The morning Joy returned home, the April air was warm and sweet with the smell of growing things. She walked with a slight limp, leaning on a cane, but her smile was radiant as she made her way to the feeding spot. Arnold and Amelia watched from the porch as she stood in her old place looking toward the forest. "Blinky?" she called softly. "It's me. I came home." For long minutes, nothing happened. Then, like a ghost materializing from shadow, Blinky emerged from the trees. He moved slowly, cautiously, as if not quite believing what he was seeing. Joy stood perfectly still, tears running down her face. "Hey boy, I missed you so much." Blinky approached closer than he'd ever come to Arnold, stopping just 6 feet from Joy. He made a soft chirping sound, the same greeting he'd used when he was young. Joy slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out the pink hair bow, now cleaned and carefully pressed. She clipped it into her hair where it caught the morning light. "You found it," she said to Blinky. "After all these years, you found my lucky bow and brought it to Dad when we needed luck the most. How did you know?" Blinky blinked slowly at her. That deliberate, trusting blink that had earned him his name. Then he turned and padded back toward the forest, pausing once to look over his shoulder before disappearing into the shadows. From that day forward, Blinky continued his visits, though less frequently as the years passed. Joy recovered fully from her injuries and opened a veterinary practice specializing in wildlife rehabilitation, inspired by the Bobcat who had taught her that the boundary between wild and domestic, between human and animal, was far more permeable than most people believed. She wore the pink hair bow on special occasions, her wedding day, the day she received her veterinary license, the morning she introduced her newborn son to the woods where Blinky still roamed. Each time, she felt the connection to that remarkable Bobcat who had somehow understood that love transcends species, that friendship can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes, when we need it most, the wild world offers us gifts of hope wrapped in mystery and delivered on silent paws. Arnold lived to be 87, and until his final winter, he maintained the feeding station at the edge of the property. Even when Blinky's visits became rare, then stopped altogether, whether from death or simply the natural drift of a wild animal's territory, Arnold continued the ritual, honoring the creature who had brought his daughter home with an impossible gift at the darkest moment of their lives. The pink hair bow now sits in a shadow box in Joy's clinic, alongside a photo of a young girl and a bobcat sitting in companionable silence in the Montana sunshine. Below it, a small plaque reads, "Some friendships transcend words, species, and even understanding. They simply are, perfect in their improbability, eternal in their impact." And sometimes, on misty mornings when the veil between civilization and wilderness grows thin, Joy swears she can still see amber eyes watching from the tree line, keeping vigil over the family that had offered food, friendship, and faith to a wild soul who had given them, in return, exactly what they needed when they needed it most. A reminder that love finds a way, that hope can be carried in the gentle jaws of the unexpected, and that miracles sometimes come wrapped in spotted fur and delivered on silent paws.